The night was pitch black, and the only source of illumination came from the dim glow of my car's headlights as they cut through the inky darkness. Rain tapped relentlessly against the windshield, a dissonant symphony to my racing heart. I gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity, regretting my decision to take this desolate backroad shortcut. It was a path I had never ventured down before, but the GPS assured me it was a quicker route home. My tires splashed through puddles as I navigated the winding road, the beams of light revealing eerie silhouettes of gnarled trees that seemed to lean in, whispering secrets to one another. The forest pressed close, branches scratching at the windows like skeletal fingers. An unsettling feeling crawled up my spine, and I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched. The radio, my only companion, crackled with static. I fiddled with the dial, desperate for any distraction from the growing sense of unease. Then, a voice emerged from the chaos of interference, a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "Turn back," it hissed, a spectral whisper that seemed to emanate from within the car itself. Startled, I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no one else in the car with me, and the radio display showed no station tuned in. It must have been some kind of interference, I reassured myself, though my rationalizations were far from convincing. I shook my head and pressed on, determined to reach the safety of the main road. The rain intensified, coming down in torrents that drummed against the roof like a maddened orchestra. The headlights revealed nothing but an endless, winding expanse of road that seemed to stretch into infinity. Then, the figure appeared. It was a man, drenched in rain, his clothes clinging to his skeletal frame. He stood in the middle of the road, his eyes reflecting the headlights like twin pools of darkness. Panic surged through me as I swerved to avoid him, tires screeching on the wet pavement. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him lying broken and lifeless, but there was nothing. No trace of the man remained. My heart pounded, and my hands trembled on the steering wheel. Was it a hallucination, a trick of the mind brought on by the relentless rain and isolation? I couldn't be sure, but I knew I had to get out of there. As I drove on, the rain began to fall in torrents, obscuring my vision. The road ahead disappeared into a wall of water, and I slowed down to a crawl, my anxiety growing with every passing second. It was then that I saw the flicker of taillights up ahead, a solitary vehicle seemingly abandoned in the middle of the road. Approaching cautiously, I noticed that the car was empty, its engine still running. Raindrops pelted the windows, and the rhythmic thumping of the windshield wipers echoed my racing heart. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn into some sinister trap. Then, a voice shattered the silence, coming from the shadows beyond the abandoned car. "Help me," it whimpered, a pitiful cry that sent a chill down my spine. I peered into the darkness, trying to locate the source of the voice. It was a woman, her figure barely visible in the downpour. She staggered towards me, her clothing clinging to her like a shroud. My instinct screamed at me to drive away, to escape this nightmarish scene, but something compelled me to stay. As she drew closer, I saw the terror in her eyes. She reached out a trembling hand, her fingers brushing against the glass. I hesitated for a moment, then unlocked the doors and let her in. "Thank you," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. I asked her what had happened, but she could only sob incoherently, her words lost in a torrent of fear and rain. She was shaking, her whole body racked with terror. I decided to call for help, reaching for my phone, but there was no signal. Panic began to claw its way back into my mind as I realized the isolation of our situation. The radio continued to emit static, punctuated by unsettling whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. The woman's gaze darted around the car, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to leave," she urged, her voice trembling. I nodded in agreement, turning the key in the ignition. But the engine only sputtered and died, leaving us in darkness and silence once more. Desperation gnawed at my sanity as I tried the ignition again and again, to no avail. The rain outside showed no sign of letting up, and the forest pressed closer, as if nature itself conspired against us. And then, a voice, clearer than any before, filled the car. "You should have turned back." The woman's eyes widened, and she let out a strangled cry. I turned to see her trembling finger pointing toward the rearview mirror. Behind us, in the darkness, a figure stood. It was the same man I had swerved to avoid earlier, his eyes filled with malevolent intent. With a surge of adrenaline, I yanked open the car door and pulled the woman with me. We stumbled into the rain-soaked night, our feet sinking into the mud as we ran blindly into the forest, away from the haunted road. We never looked back, never knew what became of the car or the sinister figures that seemed to haunt that forsaken stretch of road. All we knew was the overwhelming terror that had driven us into the darkness, a darkness that hid secrets too sinister to fathom. As we sprinted through the trees, the rain continued to fall, washing away any trace of our passage, as if the night itself sought to erase the memory of our ill-fated journey. And in that unending blackness, we were left with nothing but the chilling knowledge that some roads should never be traveled, especially at night.